What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danelle Hallan, and I am back with another true crime video. And today's case, it just doesn't make sense. Not just the timeline or the fact that someone can just vanish into thin air, but mainly the way that people in power responded, the way that someone's life was so quickly measured against a stereotype, and how for so long the people who should have been shouting from the rooftops were doing everything but. I have covered a good handful of MMIW cases at this point, but this one pisses me off like none of the others that I've covered before, which is probably why this is one of the more well-known MMIW cases out there. This is the story of Amber Tuccaro, a young Indigenous mother who disappeared during what should have been a quick, easy getaway, a woman whose voice was literally captured in the final moments of her known life. And yet to this day, no one has been held responsible. No one has faced the justice that she so clearly deserves. So let's go ahead and jump right into the details. Amber Alyssa Tuccaro was born on January 3rd, 1990, and from the moment that she entered the world, she was a miracle for the Tuccaro family. Vivian, her mom, who prefers to go by the name of Tootsie, so that's what I'm going to call her from this point on. So Tootsie and her husband had four amazing little boys, Billy Joe, Conrad, Justin, and Paul, but they had always dreamed of having a little girl. And this dream became a reality when they got a call from a family member who had just given birth to a little girl, and the family couldn't afford to take care of her. So they were wondering if Tootsie and her husband would want to adopt her. And so, of course, they didn't hesitate. They said yes right away. And in like -50 weather, they rushed to the hospital and brought Amber home at just 3 days old. Her brother, Billy Joe, still remembers that moment vividly. He said in an interview, quote, "It was probably one of the happiest days of my life to actually have a sister of our own now. I fell asleep with her in my arms that night." And that is a perfect example of how many people loved Amber from the moment she entered the world. Amber was a tiny little thing. She was just 6 pounds when she was adopted, and she was full of life from the start. Her family lovingly called her a backwards baby because she would stay up all night and sleep during the day, and everyone adored her. So this didn't even matter. They all just took turns caring for her. Some people would offer to stay up throughout the night while she was bouncing off the walls. She had this bright magnetic energy that made people gravitate toward her. She was such a cute, tiny little thing. And so she grew up in the Fort Chipewyan and Fort McMurray area in Alberta, Canada, and this shaped her into someone vibrant and full of personality. She was a proud member of the Miksuk Cree First Nation and the kind of person that left an impression on everyone that she met. You could not possibly forget Amber. And as she got older, that energy never faded. Everyone that knew her lovingly remembered how Amber was the kind of person that you knew was home because her music would be blasting through the house. Like you could hear it clear all the way down the street, and she would be inside dancing and singing her heart out. Maybe not always on key, but that was probably one of the best parts of her charm. Her mom would laugh and say, quote, "She wasn't the best dancer, but she sure was passionate." And about as memorable as her singing and dancing and constant blasting of music was her laugh. Everyone described it as being loud and contagious. It was one of those laughs where you hear it and you cannot possibly keep a straight face. You have to laugh along with her. Now, while Amber was still young, Tootsie and her husband ended up getting a divorce, and that change in the family brought her even closer to her siblings. Paul, in particular, one of her older brothers, actually stepped up to help raise her during her teen years. I think he was actually already married, and she was really close to her sister-in-law, and Paul was fiercely protective of her, okay? Because she was the kind of girl that wanted to go out and have fun. She wanted to go hang out with her friends, walk around the park, take trails, and he was the kind of brother who would be out looking for her if she hadn't come home right on time. There was actually a funny story one of her friends told about how at one point she hid in a bush for who knows how long to try to be able to stay out a little bit longer with her friends. And she didn't get into trouble. She was just being your typical teen, and he was just being your typical protective brother. And having four brothers, she had so many people looking out for her always. Now, later in life, Amber ended up reconnecting with her biological parents, and she did spend a little bit of time with them as well. She seemed to kind of bounce around to different houses, from being with Tootsie to her brothers, to her mom, to her biological mother, mother, but her foundation was always with the Tuccaro family, the people that had raised her, that had cherished her, and never gave up on her. And this brings us to 2010, the year that changed everything. Now, in 2010, 20-year-old Amber was living with her mother, Tootsie, and her now 14-month-old son named Jacob. And Amber had been navigating being a single mother with all of the love and support of her family, and she was trying to figure this all out, and that little boy was Amber's whole entire world. Her family said that she was doing everything she possibly could to be the best mom. She was so excited to have a little boy. She had so many big dreams for the both of them. She had plans of going back to school. She wanted to get her own place. She was doing her best to build a stable future, and she was actively working towards those goals, and her determination to give Jacob a better life was apparent to everyone around her. And so a part of that, and to help stabilize her situation further, Amber had been working with a place called the Unity House, which is a local women's shelter that provides support services and assistance to people with finding things like permanent housing. And so this was something that she really wanted help with, and it was a step forward for her and her son, a place where she could receive this help, breathe a little easier. So everything was coming together. And while she was there, Amber ended up meeting a woman named Evangeline, and this seemed to just be a random friend that she met, kind of got close to, and Evangeline told Amber that she had an upcoming doctor's appointment in Edmonton for, I think, some back issues that she had. I can't be absolute. I only saw that on a few sources. But regardless, Evangeline invited Amber to come with her on this trip. I guess she didn't want to go alone. And so Amber saw this as a chance to get out of town briefly, have a little reset. But when she told her mom about the plan, Tootsie had an uneasy feeling. I don't think she'd ever met Evangeline, or at least she didn't know her very well. And also, Amber was trying to save up money to get a house, to have some place for her and Jacob to call their own. And so she's like, why are you going to spend money on plane tickets and staying in a motel? But Amber kept saying, everything had already been taken care of. Everything had been paid for. She wasn't worried about it. This was like a fun, free vacation for her to go on. So she was excited. And despite her mom's concerns, Amber agreed to go, and she was taking Jacob along with her. But this trip, spontaneous and only meant to last for a day or two, would end up being the very last time anyone ever saw her alive. Amber had once joked to her family that one day she would be on posters and billboards, and it was meant to be this lighthearted, playful statement about her and her off-key singing and dancing. And Amber Tuccaro would end up on posters and billboards, but not in the way that anyone ever should. And this brings us to August 17th, 2010. That day went on like normal. Amber and Evangeline spent time together preparing for their trip. They put some blonde streaks in Amber's hair, and the three of them, Evangeline, Amber, and Jacob, flew from Fort McMurray to Edmonton. And they ended up checking into a motel in Nisku, which is a small community near the airport right on the outskirts of Edmonton. And the first day went smoothly. They settled in, nothing seemed unusual. And then the following day of August 18th, Amber texted her mom throughout the day. Again, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The two were incredibly close, and it wasn't like Amber to go long without responding to her. So when those messages between the two suddenly stopped at some point that day, Tootsie immediately felt unsettled. Her gut told her something was not right. And this silence didn't feel like something that she should brush off. So trusting her instincts, Tootsie decided to reach out to Evangeline around 9:30 p.m. that night. She just wanted to make sure everything was okay. Obviously, everyone's going to worry about their baby while they're off traveling somewhere. And Evangeline told her that everything was fine. Amber and Jacob were asleep in the motel room, but that wasn't sitting right with Tootsie because Amber wasn't the type to go to bed early. Something about this whole situation was just feeling off, but Tootsie tried to stay calm and not jump to conclusions. However, the next day, everything changed. On August 19th, Evangeline ended up calling Tootsie at some point. It's not really clear. And she casually said that Amber had left in the middle of the night before to get pizza, and she still hadn't come back. She explained that Amber had left Jacob behind and her care was supposed to be gone for just a little bit, but now she had no idea where Amber was, and I guess Amber was also unreachable by phone. And so those details alone immediately raised red flags for Tootsie. Amber would never just leave her son behind without saying anything, and especially without intentions of coming back to get him. They did everything together. He was constantly on her side. This was completely out of character. But that wasn't the only odd thing. Vivian was like, I just spoke to you last night at 9:30 p.m. You said Amber was sleeping. Jacob was sleeping. Why did she wake up in the middle of the night and randomly decide to leave for pizza and not come back? And so when Tootsie started to question the version of events that she was being told by Evangeline, Evangeline began shifting her story. Suddenly, it wasn't pizza that Amber went to get anymore. Now, Amber had actually gone out to get diapers, and eventually that story changed as well. And then finally, Evangeline ended up telling Tootsie, you need to come pick up Jacob right away. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You need to come and get him. And so Tootsie's in a panic now, and the whole family is trying to figure out what is going on. They're having to go all this distance to go and pick up Jacob. They have no clue where Amber is. But before Tootsie could even make any arrangements, and she's probably flying trying to get these done, Evangeline had already checked out of the motel. She left Amber's suitcase and all of her belongings with the receptionist, dropped Jacob off with authorities, just like was like, here's a baby, not mine, bye, and left Edmonton altogether. On August 20th, 2010, Amber's family ended up reporting her missing to the RCMP in Leduc County. They had safely taken Jacob into their custody, but there was still no sign of Amber anywhere. And so everyone in her family was incredibly worried. This was not like her. Something had to have gone wrong, but the RCMP told Tootsie not to worry. They said Amber was probably out partying and that she would show up. They didn't seem to care that Amber was a dedicated mother. She had essentially abandoned her child, and that there was no detail given by Evangeline at all that was making sense about Amber leaving the motel mysteriously. And so Tootsie pushed. She was determined to not allow this to be swept under the rug. Because if you know anything about MMIW cases, this is the same tired stereotype that is used time and time and time again for missing Indigenous women. And it was unacceptable. They were not going to sit back and let her become another statistic. And so after some back and forth, the RCMP finally agreed to take the report. But even then, they didn't actually list her as a missing person for a few days. And they also didn't treat it like an emergency. Now, an officer did end up reaching out to Evangeline after Tootsie really pushed them to, and Evangeline repeated the same story about Amber going to get food, this pizza, and not coming back. So I guess she no longer left to get diapers or any of those other versions that initially she had told Tootsie. And Tootsie also wasn't the only one that said that there just felt like something off with Evangeline. The officer noted that Evangeline seemed more concerned about the fact that Amber had been wearing her sweater and had allegedly taken some of her money than she was about the fact that Amber just disappeared, leaving her with the baby. She was mad and irritated for all of the wrong reasons. And while she was cooperative, again, something just didn't feel right. But despite the officer clearly noting the odd behavior from Evangeline, that seemed to be the extent of the investigation. She was never formally brought in for any sort of questioning beyond that. Now, a few days passed and there was still no Amber, and her family kept calling for updates. I am sure they were sitting there going out of their minds, but the RCMP had no updates for them. And this is when they found out it had actually been like 2 or 3 days before the RCMP actually listed Amber as a missing person. And then on September 1st, less than 2 weeks later, Tootsie called again. No one could understand what was happening. Were there searches? Were there any efforts at all? Had they received any tips? And the response that they got instead was earth-shattering. Tootsie was told that Amber had actually been removed from the missing persons list. The reason? Someone had reported seeing her, but the RCMP admitted that they hadn't actually ever confirmed that sighting. They didn't have proof. They never laid eyes on her. They just got this tip, oh yeah, I think I saw Amber somewhere, and that was enough for them to say, you know what? That's good enough for us. Take her on off the list. Amber's family was devastated and confused, and they were begging the RCMP to take this seriously. And just days later, to make matters so much worse, the RCMP made a public statement. And they said to everyone out in Edmonton, everyone watching, that Amber was likely not in danger and was probably still in Edmonton. completely fine. It came across like they were just suggesting she had chosen to walk away, that she had voluntarily abandoned her child and her life. And there was no evidence to support this claim other than their own assumptions that they made. The RCMP's words didn't just undermine the urgency of the situation, but they were painting a picture of Amber that her loved ones didn't recognize at all, and that the public was thinking, oh, it's just another Indigenous girl that has decided to leave her family, go off and party, do drugs. It's not worth looking for her. I cannot even begin to imagine how Amber's family was feeling during this time, because the RCMP hadn't even told them when they removed Amber from the missing persons list. They didn't apologize for doing it. They didn't seem to care that there was no solid reason for them to have done it. And they didn't seem interested in correcting it either until weeks later. They finally put Amber back on the list on September 23rd. And that entire time, no one was looking for her other than family and friends. The media wasn't speaking about her. RCMP wasn't questioning anyone. Decisions had been made about Amber's case, and her loved ones were being left in the dark. And just for a moment, try to imagine someone that you love so much goes missing. And for the entire first month that they're missing, it feels like not a single person gives a damn. No one wants to talk to you. People are just making assumptions that you know are not right. Someone that you have known from the moment they were born on, you know it's not like them. And someone that's known them for all of 10 seconds is like, you know what? We think we know better. I legitimately would lose my mind. Like, all my marbles gone. And unfortunately, it didn't get any better. Months passed and the RCMP continued to do very little. They hadn't formally interviewed Amber's friend Evangeline still. They didn't collect any surveillance from the motel. They didn't secure Amber's belongings. In fact, her suitcase and all of those things that Evangeline just dumped to reception before she left had been sitting at the motel untouched for 2 months before RCMP sent someone to go and get it. And when the RCMP did finally retrieve it, they just snapped a few pictures and failed to preserve it properly as evidence. It was improperly stored, and 10 steps worse than that, it eventually ended up being destroyed. Tootsie was desperate for answers, and she kept calling the RCMP constantly, sometimes multiple times a day. Every time someone mentioned a potential sighting, she was on the phone. She took down names and addresses, anything that she could, and she passed along every tip that she got to investigators, no matter how small or unlikely it seemed. And when nothing was done, she didn't wait. She took matters into her own hands. Tootsie was searching rural back roads. She followed directions from strangers who said that they heard rumors. She drove out to properties, knocked on doors, asked questions, and pleaded for any information. At one point, someone even reported seeing a woman who they believed was Amber at a local motel, and Tootsie didn't hesitate. She showed up there, banging on the door she believed Amber may be behind, hoping it was her daughter, and ended up calling the RCMP for backup. And thankfully, they did show up and they did help out, but it wasn't Amber. It was a different woman. However, Tootsie had no intentions of stopping. She wasn't going to wait for answers. She was going to find them herself if no one else was going to look for her daughter. And months just continued to pass with no sign of Amber and no answers. And then came the 1-year mark. 1 year after Amber vanished, her family held a vigil, a press conference, and a public march to try to bring any sort of awareness to her case that they could, because at this point, they were the only ones keeping her story out there and encouraging the public to continue looking for her, because Amber still hadn't been found. And for the very first time, police finally vaguely acknowledged the fact that foul play may be involved in this case. But it wasn't until January of 2012, nearly a year and a half after Amber disappeared and 6 months after that press conference, that the RCMP finally told Tootsie about the infamous phone call. And I bet even if you are not very familiar with this case, you have probably heard a clip of this phone call somewhere before, because this was a call that had been recorded the very night Amber went missing, a call that captured her obvious fear and distress, and a call that would become the largest piece of evidence in the case because it changed everything. It reaffirmed everyone's fears that they had had from the get-go, at least her family's, that this was not Amber willingly going off. Someone had done something to her. Officers from Project CARE, which is a specialized unit within the RCMP that focuses specifically on missing and murdered persons, had been reviewing case files and call logs when they ended up coming across this recording. And so they went to Tootsie's home to share what they had found. And it was during this visit, after they played the call, that they told her they believed Amber was likely no longer alive. And they didn't give any reasoning as to why they believed this other than the call in and of itself. Now, this call had taken place, like I said, on the night that Amber disappeared, and they were able to narrow down the timeline a little better because of it. So at some point between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. on August 18th, Amber left the motel in Nisku, leaving Jacob behind in Evangeline's care. Now, while that does seem to somewhat match up, I do want to quickly note that this means that when Tootsie reached out to Evangeline and she said Amber was sleeping at 9:30 p.m., that was a blatant lie because Amber had already been gone for like 1 or 2 hours at this point. Now, it's unclear what exactly Amber planned on doing when she left the motel. They only seem to know she had intentions of going into Edmonton, but they don't know why. Maybe it was to get pizza or diapers, or maybe it was to see someone. But regardless, she planned to get there by hitchhiking. She was last seen getting into the car of an unknown man near Airport Road in Leduc County. And while she was in the car with this man she didn't know, Amber just so happened to receive a call from her biological brother who was incarcerated in Edmonton at the time. And because the call originated from a jail line, it was automatically recorded, a fact that no one could have known would later become the single most significant piece of evidence in the case. And that's insane to me, you guys. Like, the chances of that happening are so wild. Now, this call lasted around 15 minutes, like just under it. And in it, Amber can be heard questioning the man that she's with. And again, it's clear she does not know this guy. And as time passes, you get the feeling that she doesn't trust him. Her tone is calm at first, but it grows more concerned as time passes. And it was obvious she was picking up that something was wrong here. And so she started to ask him where they were going. You know, what street are we on? Are you taking me into Edmonton? Saying things like, quote, "You'd better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go." And the man just kept on insisting that they were heading into Edmonton just like she asked, that they're on 50th Street, and he sounded calm and collected. But investigators later confirmed that was a lie. He was driving south into the more remote stretches of Leduc County. This was the last time anyone would ever hear Amber's voice because suddenly the call cuts out and Amber goes missing. And I do believe that they heard most of the call. There were still a few things that were redacted from it. And so on August 29th, 2012, 2 years after Amber went missing, Project CARE decided to hold a press conference, and they decided to release a 60-second clip from that last phone call. And it was bits and pieces from the entirety of the clip. It wasn't like 60 seconds straight. It was little chunks taken from all across it.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north to Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not take me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not. Then where the fuck are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
No, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
The road is down.
Travel.
Down.
For Amber's mother, listening to the recording is excruciating. She spent the past 2 years raising Amber's little boy. She says it took a year to convince the RCMP that her daughter wasn't just another missing Aboriginal woman.
Please listen to the man's voice. And if you recognize him, call the police. Please. Please help us. bring Amber home.
And this was unprecedented, okay? This was the first time in Canadian history that the RCMP had released audio from a homicide investigation like this. If you know anything at all about Canada, they don't release a single thing about cases. They are very tight when it comes to security and protecting the integrity of the investigation. I feel like them releasing this was likely a desperate attempt to make up for all the horrific police work the first 2 years of the case. They so genuinely brushed this case off as Amber willingly deciding to leave. And then I'm sure they heard that and they were like, oh crap. Like from the get-go, if we had looked into this, if we had gone through call logs, we could have immediately found that no, she was with some strange man, obviously taking her somewhere she didn't want to go, and we could have done something sooner. So I think they panicked and they're like, let's just go ahead and toss something out there to placate everybody. And I'm happy they did, because the hope was that someone might recognize the voice of the man in the car with Amber. And the response was immediate, because this clip went viral, probably because nobody in Canada had this kind of insight into a case before. And so everyone was hearing about it. Everyone was interested in it. And dozens of tips came in. And while most of them were people that thought their uncle, boss, ex-boyfriend could be the person behind the voice, several women identified the same local man, someone that they had accepted rides from before. So it's not just a situation of, hey, kind of sounds like this guy I know. It's women saying, this creepy man picked us up hitchhiking and gave us rides several times before. Like, there's several connections here. You should probably look into it. And all of these women were so sure it was this local man. But the RCMP later claimed that they investigated this guy and ruled him out. But again, because they released nothing, they didn't say how. They didn't share what methods they used. And many people, including the women who came forward, still don't seem to be convinced. And then just a few days after this was released, which is crazy timing, on September 1st, 2012, a group of young horseback riders in Leduc County ended up making a grim discovery. They were riding through a field and one of the horses got spooked by something that was kind of like white and reflecting light in the tree line. And so they went over there to try to get a better look and figure out what this flashing white thing was. And ultimately, they found a human skull and immediately called authorities. RCMP arrived right away and conducted a 2-day search of the area. And this area was just off of Range Road 241 and Highway 623, which, interestingly, in my opinion, is a hop, skip, jump away from 50th Street, where this man in the call said he had been taking Amber. They did recover additional remains. I am not sure if it was a full set of remains or partial. Nothing more of what was found has been shared. And 3 days after, on September 4th, the remains were confirmed through dental records to belong to Amber Tuccaro. Amber had not, in fact, run away like they had been trying to claim. She had been murdered, probably almost immediately after she was picked up that night. Her body had been left in a rural area, not completely deserted, but it's remote enough that it wasn't somewhere you would accidentally stumble upon. It's the kind of place where you'd only end up there if you'd been there before. And from how it's been described, again, it's rural, but the roads are still frequently traveled. People use them often, and there are a handful of farmhouses nearby, suggesting this level of confidence in whoever placed her there, as well as a level of comfort with the area. It sounded like it was done by someone who had either grown up nearby, worked in the area, or potentially had used that same location before, which I will get much deeper into in a little bit.
You know, Amber used to like and sing and everything, and she didn't have the greatest voice. And I told her, don't sing, girl. And she's like, one of these days, Mom, I'm going to be on billboards and all over. And to see this.
But Vivian never expected to see her youngest daughter's name on a billboard with the caption "Unsolved Homicide" next to her picture. It's a new campaign RCMP hope will generate more leads and public tips to the night Amber went missing.
Because of the location of where she went missing from is why we're targeting this area. We're hoping that someone from this area recognizes that voice.
And that person behind that voice recording, I say to you, if you're any kind of a man, step forward and reveal yourself.
Amber could be anybody's daughter. She's more than just a billboard. She's more than just a case file. She's somebody's daughter. somebody's sister and
But even after this discovery of Amber's remains, the investigation again went silent. And the silence after this discovery of Amber's remains was crushing. Her family thought for sure answers would follow, that surely once Amber had been found, the RCMP would finally open up about what they knew. But just like before, they were met with a wall. There was no public update after this, no clarification about what had been found, no information about whether forensic evidence like clothing, DNA, or personal items had been recovered, and to this day, even the autopsy report has not been released to the public, which I do get that, but even down to just the cause of death, there's nothing out there, and I'm unsure if even her family knows, because I don't think the public should expect to have all of these things released to them. I really don't, but the family should. Now, the RCMP, like many law enforcement agencies, I've already said this so many times in this video, they keep case information close to the vest. But in Amber's case, the approach felt so extreme and honestly kind of personal. Her family wasn't asking for press releases or media coverage. They were simply asking to be included, to be informed. And instead, they were left in the dark, forced to guess what was going on with the investigation into their own loved one's death. And that kind of silence, it doesn't protect a case. All it does is deepens the grief. So in March of 2014, a year and a half after Amber's remains were identified, her family had enough. They didn't want to deal with this anymore. They were so hurt and angry that they decided to take a pretty major step, and they filed an official complaint with Canada's Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, which is also known as the CRCC, because they believe that from day one, Amber's case had been neglected, dismissed, mishandled, and the lack of early action may have cost Amber her life. They wondered if maybe Amber had been okay. What if this man held her hostage for a few days, and if her disappearance had been treated seriously like they knew it was and should be, they could have found her and brought her home. And at the very least, this inaction traumatized her family and forced them to endure unimaginable pain and grief that could have and should have been prevented. And so as that was going on, parallel to that, in 2017, there was a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. And Amber's case ended up being highlighted as a prime example of institutional failure. Her brother Paul testified for nearly 2 hours, recounting everything the family had endured, how they had begged RCMP to take Amber's case seriously, only to be brushed off and misled. And Paul revealed so many horrific things of the case. Not only had Amber's name been removed from the missing persons database early on, but the RCMP had access to that phone recording for nearly a year before they ever told family about it. And so 6 months into her disappearance, they knew about this and they didn't do anything about it. I mean, when you have something like that, crowdsourcing is probably going to be your most likely bet. Showing that to family who might recognize the voice is going to be your best bet. So why did they sit on that for an entire year? This important piece of evidence was buried while Amber's loved ones searched blindly. And so in 2018, the CRCC officially released their final report of their investigation, not like the total inquiry being done, but this was the direct report after the complaint Tootsie had made. And it confirmed what Amber's family had always known, that the investigation into her disappearance was, quote, deficient. It did not follow proper protocol, it lacked urgency, and it was tainted by bias. Now, the whole report has not been released that I can find. I know that her family did say they planned to release the whole thing. They wanted everyone to know just how bad this was, but I've only been able to find a very small snippet that just kind of briefly goes over everything. And so that snippet shows that the RCMP, one, had waited a full month after the missing persons report to begin a proper investigation, and even then it was bare minimum. They also failed to formally interview Evangeline, the last person to see Amber, during that initial investigation. And that could have brought so many answers, because why had she lied to Amber's mom about Amber being asleep when she had actually already left? Now, was this innocent to not throw Amber under the bus, or to make sure Tootsie wasn't worried, or did she know there was something else going on? And why did she dispose of Amber's things to the receptionist, dump Jacob off with RCMP, and then just completely flee the town altogether? And again, this could be a situation where she was like, I don't know this girl very well. I'm not about to get into the middle of this. Like, I'm trying to get my stuff together. Or again, she might have information, but nobody knew at this point because no one ever pushed her for answers. And even worse, they were able to find some of the investigative reports. And it seems that after that initial phone call where she was, quote, cooperative, but was still a little odd, they had tried to follow up with her through phone call. And at that point, she was described as being, quote, belligerent and was apparently talking crazy, acting super suspicious, and they felt like she might have information she was withholding. I guess she started calling and leaving rambling voice messages to investigators at all hours of the night. She was acting so strangely, but despite all of that, they still just left it at that. The report also confirmed that they had mishandled and later destroyed Amber's suitcase, which could have held vital forensic evidence. They also waited 4 months before conducting key interviews, including formally interviewing Tootsie. They had also removed Amber from that missing persons list without proof that she was safe. They were able to confirm there was nothing to support that. They just did it. And perhaps most damning, they treated Amber's case with a lack of seriousness because of preconceived notions about who she was, a young Indigenous mother assumed to be out partying. And so the CRCC issued 15 or 17, I've seen both numbers, recommendations for reform, and all of them were based on failures in Amber's case alone. And the RCMP commissioner did formally accept nearly all of them, but at this point, it was too late for Amber. We're talking 2018 here. Missing and was murdered in 2010. It had been 8 years. 8 years of so many missed opportunities, of witnesses that might now be gone, of surveillance that is now gone, of forensics that have degraded. That is so infuriating.
Amber's brother Paul and her mother Vivian spoke to the media and read some of the report.
The commission found that the investigation into Miss Tuccaro's disappearance was deficient in that various members were either not properly trained or did not adhere to their training, and that various members did not comply with policies, procedures, and guidelines.
Acting Commanding Officer John Ferguson from the Alberta RCMP K Division spoke on behalf of RCMP Commissioner Lucky.
The RCMP is committed to immediately implementing the recommendations. The RCMP understands the urgency and importance of missing person cases. We must learn from our mistakes and continue to move forward with new policies and procedures.
The family has decided not to share the full report at this time.
This is by far the greatest and hardest thing that our family is facing, in the sense that we now have the report and now know that my sister's case was mishandled from the outset.
Amber's killer has never been found.
I think the hardest thing for myself and my family is knowing that the killer is still out there. And I don't think we'll ever have any peace of mind, or, I don't know, people say closure. What is that, like, really? So, to the dirty bastard that's out there, like April was saying earlier, we are not going away, and we'll keep searching till you're caught.
And then on July 25th, 2019, nearly a year after that CRCC report was released, Alberta RCMP held a public press conference, and they issued an apology to Amber's family. The deputy commissioner stood before the cameras and he admitted that the investigation into Amber Tuccaro's disappearance was not the RCMP's best work, saying, quote, "We were not the police service we strive to be." He did apologize to Amber's family. He acknowledged the long-term harm that was caused by their inaction, but this apology fell so hollow and so short because it felt like it had been forced. It only came after 9 years now of silence, after public and media pressure. And not just that, but in the CRCC's recommendations, they had specifically asked the RCMP to apologize, and it still took them a year after that to do it, which is nuts. That would be like one of the first things that I would try to do. And to make matters worse, the RCMP officials walked out immediately after delivering their statement, refusing to take any questions. They left Amber's grieving family standing alone before reporters, forced to relive their trauma without any support or backing from law enforcement.
We agree with the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission that in 2010, our Leduc Detachment's initial missing person investigation was not our best work and was not in line with our established practices, procedures, and guidelines. At the beginning of this investigation, the RCMP was not the police service we strive to be. On behalf of the RCMP, I am truly sorry.
He says new recruits will be trained more in how to handle missing persons cases. He says some members from the Leduc Detachment no longer work for the RCMP.
It's been a long 9 years. And the killer is still out there. But like April Eve said, we're never giving up. You will be caught. And my girl will have justice.
Before the event was over, Deputy Commissioner Curtis Zlbaki left, saying he had other meetings to attend. This did not go over well with Amber's family.
An apology needs to be heartfelt, not just words. You know what I mean? See, look again, they just proved again. They're just getting up and leaving. Next appointment, right? I mean, they're the ones apologizing, but yet they can get up and walk away. What does that say?
With the murder still unsolved, the family has put out a $5,000 reward for information leading to Amber's killer.
That press conference was supposed to be a moment of healing, a chance for the RCMP to stand beside Amber's family and acknowledge not only their pain, but their role in it. But instead, it just felt like another box checked. And after all of that, Amber's family still had no more answers than before. They had no clue what happened to their sweet and loved little girl. They didn't know why she left that motel, who picked her up, and if that person was still out there breathing the same air as everyone else and potentially going on to hurt other people. And so to this day, Amber's case remains unsolved, but there have been so many theories that have emerged. And the most widely accepted theory is that that unidentified man that gave Amber a ride, the man heard in the call, is responsible for her death, which I absolutely believe. His voice remains one of the most distinctive and haunting pieces of evidence in Canadian criminal history. And the RCMP had again released it in hopes that someone would recognize it. And nearly 2,000 tips have come in just from that audio alone. Dozens of people have submitted voice recordings of men that they suspected, and the RCMP has sent dozens of them off to be compared forensically. And the clip has been shared so widely, but what seemed like the most promising tip ultimately ended up going nowhere because voice comparisons are not an exact science. And I didn't know enough about them, and I was really hoping when I saw that they released it that something would come of it. But unfortunately, it just seems like the science isn't there yet. So for a truly accurate analysis, something that authorities would be able to work with, the comparison would need to be from the same year that the call was recorded in similar acoustic conditions and with nearly identical background noise and audio quality. It has to all be the same, and we're now talking over a decade beyond that. So that's just not feasible in most real-world cases. I don't think a lot of people would just so happen to have a recording of the person they think sounds similar from back in 2010 while driving in a car while someone else is on the phone. You know, like it's just not something I think anyone can pull off. And they did still try. They sent in so many different audio clips for comparison, but they just didn't get any hits. And I feel like it's highly possible that they might have a match. It's just impossible to make it with the current state of voice comparison. Now, there's still hope that forensic technology continues to evolve. We've seen how many things have changed just in the past like 5 years alone. And so maybe one day this recording does still become the key that leads to finding her killer. Even if they can't get an exact match on the voice, if someone recognizes that voice, hands over information about that person, there's other ways to see if maybe they're involved. So I still think there's so much weight to that voice recording. And that brings us to the next theory, that people believe Amber may have been the victim of a serial killer, which I feel like those two theories are one and the same, that that person that picked her up is the potential serial killer everyone is so concerned about. So between 2002 and 2015, at least 5 Indigenous women went missing from Edmonton and were found murdered in the rural outskirts of Leduc County, including Amber. And when you guys hear all of the details about this, you're going to be sold on this being a problem that they seriously need to figure out. So all 5 were women, all had vulnerabilities, and all were found within just miles of each other. And so all of these different cases led a lot of people to believe that this stretch of land has been used repeatedly, possibly by one serial offender, possibly by multiple serial offenders, that this area has served as a long-time dumping ground for what many people are calling the Leduc County Killer. Now, Edna Bernard was actually the first woman that went missing in September of 2002, and she was actually found just a day later. Her body had been badly burned and was left in a wooded area off of Range Road 245. And then came Katie Sylvia Ballantyne, and she was last seen in April of 2003, and her remains were found 3 months later in a farmer's field near Range Road 235. Then was Dolores Brower. She disappeared in 2004 while hitchhiking and wasn't found until 2015 in East Leduc. And so she was actually found after Amber's remains were found. And then there was Corey Ottenbright. She vanished the same year as Dolores Brower, so also in 2004, and her remains, like Dolores's, weren't discovered until 2015 in the very same area. And then there's Amber, who vanished in 2010. And so there's definitely a gap because Dolores Brower and Corey Ottenbright were known to have disappeared in 2004. And so we're talking like 6 years here. However, they weren't found until 2015. And so it makes me wonder if there's other women that went missing between 2004 and then when Amber disappeared in 2010 that just haven't been found, because we know that Amber was found off of Range Road 241. And so when I went on to Google Maps, out there in the middle of nowhere in Leduc County, there's this very rural area of land, and it's all these different range roads running perpendicular in numerical order. So Range Road 241, then Range Road 242, then Range Road 243. And so it's so strange that all of these 5 women were found off of these little range road areas running perpendicular. It's like someone's like, okay, let's start at 40 and work our way up. And all of them were found within 5 miles of each other. So within a few minutes drive. And you will have a hard time convincing me that that is just a coincidence. I feel like the patterns here are undeniable. And these women were all Indigenous. Most of them were mothers. Many faced vulnerabilities such as poverty, homelessness, addiction. And when you look at this pattern from a wider lens, it mirrors exactly what we know about serial killers. They often target those that are marginalized or less likely to receive urgent law enforcement attention, women who are seen by society as vulnerable, women who are dismissed. These aren't random cases. These are people who were preyed upon, people that were hitchhiking, people that were in SW. People like that can so easily be picked up and become targets of these serial predators. Serial killers often rely on predictability, areas that they know well, demographics that they know won't trigger immediate alarm bells. And in this part of Alberta, history has shown time and time again that Indigenous women are often the least protected and least prioritized. And the patterns of Range Road and the numerical order, all of it just screams serial killer to me. Now, RCMP has never officially linked any of these cases, and to add to the likeliness of this possibility, Project Care, that was working on Amber's case, was actually launched in 2003, specifically after a growing number of Indigenous women and vulnerable individuals were found missing or turning up murdered in and around Edmonton and in Leduc County. And so authorities suspected that these cases weren't isolated, that there was a serial killer preying on women. This isn't just a local random theory. Even RCMP officials admitted it's a possibility that seriously had to be considered. They don't just form an entire unit within the RCMP to look into this unless they so strongly feel that's a thing. And a lot of people have said Amber's not a perfect fit, not just because she went missing in 2010, so far after that last known person went missing in 2004. She also had no ties to drug use or SW, but she was hitchhiking and she was Indigenous, and that fits the profile way too closely for it to be dismissed. And then when it comes to the phone call, the way that that man spoke to Amber, how calm he was, how directly he seemed to just pick up and head straight for that rural location, it's still the loudest proof, in my opinion, that this person has done this before and may do it again, and quite possibly already have. It has been 15 years since then. There's no telling.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we? No, we're not. Then where the fuck are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street.
50th Street.
East, right? Over down. Bravo.
And speaking of serial killers, and to show you how much of a rampant problem these serial killers are in Canada, in 2007, a man named Thomas Velka was actually arrested and later convicted of murdering at least one vulnerable woman in the Edmonton area. And he is believed to be a full-on serial killer. He was charged with the deaths of 2 women. Both of them were involved in SW, again, a very vulnerable group of people, but he was ultimately only convicted with that one, and he is suspected of being behind several more. And they've actually considered him as potentially being involved to some of those cases in Leduc County simply because they know he was active during that time. But none of that has ever been confirmed, and all of those cases remain unsolved. Now, there is one detail that would obviously rule him out in Amber's case right away. He was incarcerated at the time she disappeared. So again, while he may be connected to earlier victims like Dolores Brower or Corey Ottenbright, he could not have been the man in the car with Amber, but there's always been speculation that there's more than one predator. And while this is considered, again, to be the largest possible theory in Amber's disappearance and murder by many, other people still question the role of Evangeline in all of this. And I mean, I completely understand why. Why did she lie about Amber's whereabouts to Tootsie? Why did she leave the city so quickly after Amber disappeared? RCMP has admitted that they did not formally question her during those early stages of the investigation. It wasn't until the case was officially transitioned to a homicide investigation that she was finally brought in and interviewed. So it didn't stay that way. They did eventually question her, but at what point was that? Honestly, I've got no idea. But reportedly, when they did, she was ruled out as a suspect. But not everyone is convinced. You know, her story kept shifting, her swift departure. It definitely feels a little bit weird, and it left a void of unanswered questions that still weigh heavily on Amber's loved ones, because she was the one who invited Amber onto this trip. And also, a lot of people have questioned why that particular hotel, because according to Amber, they were going there for a doctor's appointment that Evangeline went to. And I can't help but wonder, did she ever go to that doctor's appointment? Is that a real thing that was happening? But also, one of the main things Amber said they were going to do while they were there, since obviously the doctor's appointment isn't going to take the entire few days, they were planning on taking Jacob to one of Edmonton's malls. And this hotel was incredibly far away from that. So while it was convenient to the airport, it wasn't convenient to all of the other things they were supposed to be doing. And they would have had to find a ride to all those places. So people just think it's kind of weird and that there's still something sketchy going on with that, but authorities say whatever it is, it doesn't involve Evangeline. And then a lot of people have questioned that phone call, the one captured between Amber and her incarcerated brother. And that was probably my biggest question when I went into this. After hearing about this phone call, I was like, well, wait a minute, if she was on the phone with her brother, how come family didn't know about this until a year and a half after the call happened? How did he hear Amber expressing clear concern about where she was being taken and he didn't alert anyone? I mean, the call cut off suddenly, but no follow-up was made, like you weren't worried or anything. He didn't report the call, he didn't raise alarm, and a lot of people, including some of Amber's family, are left with questions because of that. Now, he's later claimed to the host of the podcast and her defense, 50th Street, that he actually was the one who paid for Amber's plane ticket. He was the one who paid for the motel room for her and Evangeline and Jacob. And he even made claims, some pretty serious claims, that he knows who killed Amber, and even accused the RCMP of saying that if that information ever got out, he would be in big trouble. And so obviously with that information coming forward, it deepens suspicions. But unfortunately, it's not known how reliable of a source he is. He's never come forward with solid proof of anything. Nothing that he has said has been confirmed. He has a lengthy criminal history. He's actually incarcerated on a murder conviction at the moment. So take all of what I just said with a grain of salt. But what is clear is that there are still far too many unanswered questions and people who may know more than they have ever admitted. It's been over a decade since Amber Tuccaro was murdered. Authorities strongly believe that. Her family strongly believes that. Someone out there knows something, has heard this voice before, and they need to come forward with some information to help out authorities. Her son Jacob, just 14 months old when she vanished, is now a teenager, and he's grown up without his mother, who, by the way, he looks exactly like her. I'm talking copy-paste. It was so surreal seeing a photo of him after looking at so many photos of her through all of my research. And he still doesn't have answers, you guys. He doesn't know what happened to his mom. Tootsie continues to speak out. For years, she posted the audio recording of Amber's call every day, hoping that someone somewhere would recognize the voice. The RCMP claims to have improved their protocols for handling missing persons cases. They say they act faster now, that they communicate better, that they're learning from past mistakes. And after all their dirty laundry was aired to all of the public when it came to their inaction in Amber's case, it's been claimed that now her case is one of the most investigated cases in all of their history. Like, they've put in more man hours and investigative efforts at this point now to try to make up for all the time and efforts that were missed, but still it doesn't seem that it's gotten them anywhere, and the damage done in Amber's case cannot be undone. There is a $5,000 reward that remains in place for information leading to an arrest, but no charges have been filed, and the man in the recording, Amber's likely killer, has never been publicly identified. And I so strongly stand behind the fact that I feel someone knows who this is. This man has family members, a wife, children, co-workers. Someone recognizes his voice. And while the clip of this man's voice did go viral and so many people have heard it, it always shocks me when I talk about a case in a particular area and I'm like, oh, everyone has to know about this. And the amount of comments that I will get of people saying, I've lived here my whole life and I had no idea. There's always going to be someone that hasn't heard, and that one someone might be holding the key to unlock everything. So if you're out there and you have information, please share it. Share this case as far and wide as you can. Share that recording as far and wide as you can, because there's still someone out there that may have just not heard it yet. Amber Tuccaro's story is heartbreaking, and it's a reflection of how Indigenous women are treated by systems, institutions, by the very people sworn to protect them. And they're preyed on specifically because people know that, and they know that they can get away with it. Amber was so smart and funny and full of energy and endlessly devoted to her son Jacob. She had dreams of going back to school, building a future, and giving Jacob the life that he deserved. And she was doing everything in her power to move forward, even when odds were stacked against her. She should have had the chance to do all of that. She deserved to live, to thrive, to be here watching her son grow up. Her story should not be a case file. It should be a life that is still unfolding. In March of 2023, Amber's family held a press conference alongside Indigenous leaders, and still no justice. Tootsie stood before cameras and pleaded with the public once again, like she has done for 15 years at this point, asking anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. Even as they've endured unthinkable grief, Amber's family's strength has not wavered, and Tootsie's actually faced her own battle with cancer during all of this, all while continuing to demand justice for her daughter. The family also suffered another heartbreaking loss when one of Amber's brothers unexpectedly passed away. Through every setback, every moment of silence, and every unanswered question, they continue to speak Amber's name, and now it is our turn to help. We have the ability to do something to help Amber's family and help her. We just need to take the time to do it. So please share her story, share her photo, share her voice, and if you recognize the man in this recording, even if you only suspect it, please let someone know. I will have all of the information to get what you know into the right hands listed down below in the description box. Amber deserves justice, Jacob deserves answers, and the Tuccaro family deserves peace. We can't bring Amber back, but together we can make sure that her voice is never silenced again. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and go, you guys. I want to say a huge thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to Amber's story. And as you go to comment down below, I also want to remind you that Amber's son Jacob is a teenager now, and he is probably curious and wanting to watch things about his mom, and he might potentially read the comments. So please be respectful, be kind, be loving, think before you type. But with that being said, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Hallan fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.